just gonna roll with it, Chris.
That's totally fine. I like your song.
Yeah, we love it. Hello, world. This is Hello Chaos. Oh, we're still here
again.
Yeah. Problem is, so funny story. Speaking of chaos, our producer does not have headphones right now. I have her headphones because mine weren't working.
Yeah.
So there was a little chaos going on. And that was only one of the problems before we were able to bring Chris onto Hello Chaos, the show about the ups and downs, ins and outs, highlights and low points of entrepreneurship. I am your co-host, Jennifer Oladipo, aka Jenno.
And I am Jennifer Sutton, aka JJ. So the two Jens. Welcome.
Hello, Jens.
Welcome, Christopher. I'm glad you're in the studio. And why don't you just start us out? Give us the 30,000 foot of who you are and what you represent.
Sure. So I am the original founder of Reforged Gaming Lounge, and along with the co-founder David Barker, who couldn't make it today, so I'm filling in for both of us. And essentially, we saw a thing that in the world that we wanted to solve, and that was we don't have places to play video games together anymore with one another in person. And those used to exist, and those were called arcades. And I grew up in them, and I was like, hey, why did those stop? And so I started looking into those and saw that. And I was like, okay, so there's a way to do this now. And they do it in other countries, but for whatever reason in the US, it's very sporadic. And there's like one here in the Midwest, and there's one here on the East Coast. And it just doesn't seem to be like any real structure around these. They're just very Wild West-ish. And so we decided to come up with a plan to solve that. And we've been cruising right along until we ran into COVID, as a lot of businesses did. And so we kind of had to figure that out too. And we're about to make a huge milestone for us and launch our very first location for folks to come check out everything we've been working on for the past 6-ish years right here in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh, wow.
Congratulations.
Hey, congratulations. And
Thanks.
I'm curious so you said that, because I grew up in arcades. I mean, there was, and we were my husband and I were just talking about that, of what happened. Like, that used to be the place you would go. And now, my kids are gaming online.
Mm-hmm.
How did you guys know that there was a need that people still want to game in person together?
Well, just real quick, actually, I've been curious though. Is it the consoles that made everybody stop playing it together? Like what?
Like
what
the Atari consoles and all that came up, and the Xboxes?
So basically, the internet is both the solution and the cause of your problem, right?
Most things.
as like most things, right? It can solve a lot of things. It also breaks a lot of things. So, what we found, to answer the question about the arcades, why did they go away? They didn't adopt the internet. Their model was so focused on physically being there, physically putting money into things. There was nothing digital about it other than the software, right? The hardware was very mechanical. It was very hard coded to certain kind of cabinets that had boards in them that were, hey, they had to be this way because this is how we do it. This is how we make the money. And then consoles came out, like you mentioned the Atari, but once it really got around to PlayStation, Nintendo 64 era, where that first console started coming online, and that's such a driving force in the Americas and in Europe as well, that really started to shift things away from that. And as internet connectivity became more robust, all these services became digitized, but that kind of created a new problem, is that all the propinquity that came along with being in proximity to one another, but also that relationship of the proximity to oneself and to the hardware and the actual building that you would go to, all those things kind of went away, and they tried to automate that. And as we found out, that doesn't work, right? Just like, if the experience of COVID for most people, one thing is that there is an absolute desire for human beings to congregate with other human beings in somewhat close proximity, no matter what, like almost universally, right? Nothing is absolute, but really, really, really close to being absolute. So that's kind of how we found the research on it. We found, to answer the second part of the question, what's the niche? How do we discover the demand? Honestly, we just took it to market because I had a really strong feeling, because I wanted to see this more than anything. was like, this would just be a cool thing to do. And so I went to people like Michael over at Frothy Beard and some students at the College of Charleston. David worked on that more than I did, so he could speak to that a little bit more if he was here. So I'm going to try to. But that ultimately led to bringing together hundreds of students, over the course of 10 hours or so to compete in gaming tournaments, to dress up as their favorite anime gaming characters, all of these things.
Okay.
And we were like, okay, people obviously want this. And for students, it was free, but for the non-students that came, it wasn't free, and they still paid to get into this thing at the Stern Center that, up until the third year, it wasn't even open to the public. We finally convinced them to open it up, and that's really when it became a thing. And they saw, and unfortunately, it's too bad where we were going with it, that the fourth year would have been even more incredible, but unfortunately, COVID had other plans for us. So we kind of had to sit down and do a lot more research and kind of figure out, is there a way for us? How do we get back to that proximity, that propinquity, right?
Okay.
So it sounds like you were testing different versions of basically a minimum viable product. And how did
Absolutely.
you even, did I hear you mention costumes just a second ago? So
I did. Yeah. So that was actually the students' idea. So
okay.
How we got introduced to it, they had a convention that they had done that the students ran called ProCon. And a lot of it was gaming, and there was also the anime side of things. So that's kind of where the costumes and stuff came in. But there's a lot of crossover between the anime world and the gaming world, as you can imagine.
Yep.
Yeah. For those out there, if you know, but I'll just Pokemon.
Yes, that's right.
Both an anime and certainly a video game. And they approached us. We had a VR setup when VR first came out, and they wanted to add that. And so they asked us if we can do it. And we showed up there at the Stern Center just with our VR rig that first year. And we had a line out the Stern Center, and we found out that we used the HTC Vive when it first came out. That was the one of the main wired units by Valve, and or by HTC rather. It uses Valve Steam as the software. And 7 hours is the exact amount of time that those wands can go before your hands virtually disappear. Because someone was like, hey, I can't see my hands no more. And I was like, well, I don't think this is a Back to the Future moment. I think this is like the batteries have finally gone.
And just for people who aren't aware, you're talking about when you're in an AR or VR thing, you've got your headset, but you also have your some things in your hands,
right.
So that
your
you
controllers.
can,
your controllers,
so that you can orient yourself in space and do whatever it is that everyone's doing in that.
Whether it's you're grabbing something, whether it's you're whatever you're supposed to be doing in that particular application. Exactly. That's
and so when the controllers die, your hands disappear.
Exactly. All of a sudden they just poof, they're gone. You're like, oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Chris, so is your setup? Is it your games that you've designed, or are you bringing in going, hey, here's 10 Oculuses or, an equipment, and here's some games that you guys can all play together? Or are these games that you've designed?
No, these are not games that we've designed.
Okay.
There are people in this world that are really, really good at that, and we're going to keep them doing that. We're just going to help them bring it to an audience and further their audience. That's kind of our goal with this, from the developer side of things. We do have relationships with them. We want to further those relationships with them, but we want to do it in a way that makes sense because, for us to try and learn the gaming side and build those things, that may be a very, very long-term thing that we would spin up if we're successful enough to do that. But honestly, there's so many talented people out there, unless they wanted to branch off from a AAA studio and start an indie studio or something, to me, that doesn't really make much sense of trying to, go against Blizzard King Activision or EA or someone like that, because they suck up so much of the talent, right? And good on them. I mean, they make some of the most incredible titles out there, that people look forward to every single year. So we just want to continue to facilitate ways for people to engage with those that don't make the time. Essentially, it's not that they don't have the means necessarily, or they don't even have the equipment. Some of them have it at home, but they still come to us when we do events to game because they just won't make the time, because home has become where you work for a lot of people as well. And they never leave work. And so this gives the opportunity for us to give someone the ability to be like, no, I'm out. I'm not at the office right now. And they can actually answer that truthfully because they are no longer at home, which is now office number 2 for so many people, right?
So before COVID, when you're testing things out and finding that you're gaining some traction, what were some things you tried that didn't work out?
We really thought that VR was going to be like the main attraction that people
really?
after, especially what we saw at the Call to Charleston, which was like very, very, fortunate for us, but it was also the first time anyone had experienced it. We expected the return after someone had done it one time to be around 50%. It was more like 15. And we were like,
really?
But what we did find is when we threw a few consoles over there for people who were waiting, they did that for a really long time. They would sit down with a stranger if their controller was open and play Mario Kart. And we specifically picked games that were multiplayer, that were somewhat competitive, but not quite as serious. So your Mario Kart, your Smash Brothers, Mario Party, a lot of Nintendo parties, but also some sports games as well, as we open things up a little bit more as you get deeper into like the FGC community, which is the fighting games, your Street Fighter, Tekken, Mortal Kombat. The seriousness ramps up. They take it real serious, which is totally fine. There's time and a place for that. But as we're introducing things here, we wanted to go a little bit broader with that before we kind of focused on those niches, because we knew those existed already. And, while those communities are very strong, they're also kind of very tight-knit as well. So you really have to cater to those things in order to really bring them out of their shell and get them back into bringing more people to expand their communities as well. So that's kind of where we sit as the facilitator for that.
Did turning wait time into game time increase your returns? The number of customers who returned?
Well, so initially it was the console stuff was free while you just paid for the VR things. And then we very quickly figured out, actually, we just need to have a game time model and you can do whatever you want. And then that's what really like made sense for us. It was like, okay. Like if people, we're trying to dictate where people should spend their time, and don't ever do that. Like that's a good way to lose your customers. So we are really, really quickly figured that out. We're like, hey, no worries. Like, you spent your $20, you have unlimited access for the 4 hours of this thing kind of thing. And we just really did it. We named a couple of things like, hey, do you want VR only? And it had a very gaming like oriented name, one of those like let's go kind of things. If you're watching Twitch streams or whatever, the usual kind of rhetoric that flies around in the streaming community. And but something that people would find familiar in generally speaking in that kind of little world. And it made sense to people at the time. And then we figured out, as we move into a model where we have multiple stations and stuff, we really need to monetize those on more of a per hour basis. People can game as long as they want, but that makes more sense to people other than a subscription model. What we figured out very quickly, David believes in a subscription model. He does. I do not. I'm not saying that they don't exist. Like they're not out there. They are. I have Netflix sometimes too. Like, I know that they're real, but this is not like ghosts. Are they real? Not real kind of thing. But it's more of a, does that make sense for our community and what we're trying to build here? Because to me, the amount of dollars that we would have to charge is prohibitively expensive for saying that someone can come into us 20 days a week and have unfettered access to something, and at the same time have to isolate X amount of machines for that. And not be open to someone that's walking in, right? Because that's the only way, in my mind, to do it. Because it's a lot of subscription model things take the gym membership approach, where if they're here, just go use something else. It's like, that doesn't feel good. If you've ever been at the gym and I want to go to the squat rack, if they even have one, and there's like a line of 4 people over there waiting to queue in, it's like, no, I'm not.
Then you're like, what am I paying for?
Right.
What member benefits am I getting?
And and what does David think is the pro for the subscription model?
I mean, I would say number one is that it's just a guaranteed kind of revenue stream. Like what most companies that do a subscription model on there, it just shows like, hey, this shows traction. Like immediately, this is our reoccurring subscription model, right?
Gotcha.
Those kind of things. And I can't argue with that, other than, to me, that's not a good enough reason to kind of curtail our business really towards that, because we're starting to encroach back on telling people how they should spend their time or dollars, right? And I want to give them that choice. I do think that there is a way, as we expand out, as we increase the total size of a gaming lounge, what we could offer, where the percentages of open machines, it makes more sense at that point. But right now it doesn't. Because we just don't have enough like for overhead, right? If we just got super busy, you've got 20 PCs there. Okay, well, you've got 100 people that paid for a subscription, so you can serve 20% of the people that paid for this.
Yeah,
that's going to be a lot of like unhappy customers really, really quick
if they all walked in at one time,
right? And
right.
or even if a decent percentage of them comes in at one time, right? I mean, basically, if you have at least 20% of your subscriber base try and use your service, I can't think of another subscription model that only plans on serving 20% of their subscribers. Like,
right.
I'm sure there's a number in there that is more realistic. It's not 100 either percent, because that rarely ever happens too. But you would like to shoot for as many as possible, so people are getting the value out of what they're paying for.
Right.
And for us, because of that physical nature, it's one thing if Netflix servers are down. I mean, Reed Hastings is off in Bali or something. Like, he's not super concerned. I mean, other than if it's down for too long and then they start losing money, he's like, "Hey, gang, come on." But I'm sure the people that are in the data centers and stuff like that are getting breathed on pretty heavy to make these things happen and make it as available as possible. And so that's just kind of the difference of when you have that virtualization, that digitization, there is that loss of proximity, that expectation that, hey, when I paid for something, I expect to get the service, right? It's not, I walked into a restaurant and paid for this meal and then I'll see you on Tuesday when the meal's ready kind of thing. Sorry, our kitchen had technical errors. That's not an expectation that anyone would realistically go along with.
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
I think. Maybe I'm wrong.
So, Christopher, you and David kind of worked on this concept for 6 years before, or 6.5 years. What was that journey like? Like, what was it? Just kind of testing the concept? Was it building relationships? Was it like what was happening in that 6 to 6.5 years before now?
Man, it's hard to believe when someone else says it out loud and I hear it. I'm like, man, what did happen in the last 6 years? In short, a lot. First and foremost, I started this with another gentleman, Michael Ostak, who has since moved on and moved to the other side of the country, actually, with his family. He was one of our original founders. And the first person that really believed in my crazy idea, that was like, yeah, that sounds cool. Tell me more about that. And I was like, what now? Oh, we've got one.
You're like, I just want a gaming lounge. I want to bring back the.
He's like, I don't know what that is, but my daughter does. And she's very interested. And I was like, okay, cool. And Peyton actually ended up helping us out quite a bit during MVP as well, because one of her knowledge and two, her enthusiasm there as well. Super, super helpful. So we started doing events and I started approaching breweries where Charleston had this brewery renaissance in the last, 10-ish years, right? But really from 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, a lot of them were coming online. They're all competing for the same market share. They're all trying to differentiate themselves. So we just started approaching them after we had done a little bit, a couple of pop-ups at George Riano from Green by 3 used to have a space downtown. He actually let us rent his space and test out the concept there for very, very cheap and bring people in and really see if people would come out to it. And that's what kind of led us to finding other clients and things like that. One of those, David showed up as a client, who's now the co-founder. He was actually a customer that just heard about this through, I don't know, somewhere on social media that we were pushing it in a lot of places. This is pre-TikTok, so it wasn't that because I'm not going to dance or anything on a video.
What? Wait, well, that's what we invited you for, man.
I know.
Right,
I just want to let everybody know right now. Prepare yourself mentally. That will not happen. But he was just like, he asked a lot of questions. He was just like, before he left, he's like, hey man, do you guys need like help with this? And I was just like, grab a box, man. Like, yeah, I need help. I was putting all this stuff back into, I fit everything into a Volkswagen GLI at the time, which if you guys don't know, that is the sedan version of the hatchback, not the hatchback, because
not the Beetle.
Not the Golf. This was the sportier version, but it was the Passat, not the GTI is the hatchback version.
Gotcha.
And so I was just like, hey, somehow I managed to Tetris this in, including a TV screen. I wish I had photos of it because it was amazing. Probably the best engineering I've ever done in my entire life. And man, he just like he started coming out and got more involved, had more questions, had more ideas. He was a student and he had graduated a little while back and moved back to Charleston, and where he went to college, he helped run large scale gaming events there. I believe they called it the Bits and Bytes group, and they would do like just hundreds of network PCs together, because they've got college internet, they've all got computers. The college is just like, go over there and plug it all in. Whatever. It's just like, just stay out of trouble, would you? Like that kind of thing. And so him coming back and seeing someone doing this, he's like, oh, this is a thing that like, this could be a business. And I was like, we think so. And I mean, you coming out to us kind of validates that, hey, there are people out there that are looking for this, because, our $5-10 Facebook ads that we can, put on here, if these are actually having that kind of impact, I mean, credit to their algorithm at the time and its ability to place things in front of relevant people based on their interests.
Right.
It obviously was working to some degree, but there was also people, the word of mouth people that were like, oh, you got to come check this out. And we started meeting families that were gaming together, but wanted to not be at home kind of thing. They wanted to go out, the mom or the dad, they liked the beer at this place, or, the beer at that place, or wherever it may be, whatever they were brewing there. And ultimately, that kind of led David to coming into this. And then as we did the ProCon thing, as we did all these other things, we're like, okay, we think we know what this is now. And we ended up partnering with Charleston Esports when we ran a series of events during the summer of 2017 with Frothy Beard. We basically did a residency with them. If you ever talk to musicians or something and they're kind of trying to build a following, they do a residency, right?
Right.
Once a week, they play at the music farm for a month or something, right? We kind of did that at the brewery. Every Sunday we came in and set up, and we ran different tournaments. It was GoldenEye on Nintendo 64. It was Tekken on PlayStation. And then right next door was Charleston Esports doing Call of Duty tournaments every Saturday and sometimes on Sunday. And they were like, hey, who are these guys? Like over here. Cause we were literally like 3 stores down from them. And I saw the Call of Duty poster. I was like, huh. So we went over there and we ended up meeting Brian, who was with us and joined us for quite a while. And we kind of combined those two groups together. So there's this explosion of community now, but different games. So we had that kind of collision, right? Of, well, you guys want to play some Call of Duty? And like, oh, all right, I'll check out the new Call of Duty. It's like, you guys play Tekken? It's like, yeah, a little bit. And so that kind of started to manifest into a larger general community overall. And that's also, so there was that piece. And then there was the full bar because where they were holding it was Players Place Billiards, which had a full bar and a kitchen. And so when the full bar came online, that's when the females like really started to engage that were coming there with the moms and or the friend groups. They really weren't as engaged at the tap rooms, and I thought I knew why, but that validated it. It's like there's not enough choice there, because there you might have 15 different kinds of beer, but it's all beer.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
That's right.
It doesn't matter if you don't like beer. If it's, it could be 9,000 different flavors of beer. If beer doesn't do it for you, who cares, right? Baskin Robbins doesn't mean anything if you don't like ice cream. So, which is weird if you don't like ice cream, by the way. But there's all kinds of folks out there. So when we, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No. Keep going.
Yeah. So once we did that, everything really started to click for us. It was like, this is what we need. Just to finish the story, this is what we need in our location. When we do a phase 1 and we open up our first gaming lounge, we have to have a full service bar.
Okay.
We have to be able to feed people because that's the law. Although limited, we're not opening a restaurant. If you have, at least here, a liquor bar in South Carolina, you have to be able to serve food.
Yeah.
And handing someone a bag of Doritos apparently does not qualify because I asked.
Because you looked.
Yeah, I did. I was just like,
oh, that's fine. What about
you're like
bags?
A refrigerator with bottled water and Doritos.
Right.
But you can do a lot in a small kitchen with a hot plate and a fryer.
Well, we will be doing commercial grade air fryers.
Well, there you go. See.
Yeah. So we'll have a menu of about 5 things with air fryers, and that qualifies.
All right. Well, that's what I was going to ask you of, now that you've kind of tested it, you're getting ready to launch your first location. Mm-hmm. What is the set like? What have you learned to go, this is what we have to provide? And how are you, with all the different ways people, like you said, Call of Duty and esports versus people like, the old Tetris, Donkey Kong, and,
Absolutely.
that, you've got those. Do you have like the anime and Dungeons and Dragons and all that? Like, how are you dealing with that from a space perspective?
So fantastic questions, and you're certainly not the first person to ask, especially about the Dungeons and Dragons thing. With the movie coming out this week, I'm sure
I was an old
those
D&D
questions are
girl.
going to ramp up a lot too, because its popularity in the last 10 years also has really come back to prominence again. So the shorthand is no Dungeons and Dragons, no anime initially. I mean, anime is fine depending if you're talking about if you mean like Yu-Gi-Oh and cards, actually no. And here's why. There is a law in South Carolina that states that card-based games are games of chance, which implies you can win money. And dice-based games, no matter what, are also games of chance, whether it's a 20-sided die or, a 4-sided die or whatever, how many sides there are in, like, if you're actually playing like roulette, I think that's a 8-sided die.
So no casinos and no gaming.
Right, exactly. Because they all consider that gaming was, and even if you look in Vegas, they call casinos gaming, right?
Yeah.
It's the language that they use is the problem, but because of how general it is, it kind of lumped all these things together. So as much as we would love to have, everybody put on your cloak and wizard hat and come on down, we got a place for you and you can play out your campaigns and stuff here. That'd be dope. We totally want to do that, but right now, if you serve liquor, you can't do that. It is against the law. You'll lose your liquor license. So we're working, by the way, and as many people see this, and I was on another podcast to talk about this too, so I'm going to say it here.
Yeah, I saw you guys making a video.
That can be altered. So that can be altered. That law can be amended or it can be eradicated. It doesn't really matter which one, but it does need to be looked at because it's very old and it's not indicative of the state of the world now. And how people want to spend their time.
You made a really good point on your, I guess it was a video, like an update video you put for the community about the language. Here's your public service announcement, folks.
Yeah.
But what was it that you were saying that people need to like actually call up a representative and say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, essentially you just say, hey, we have community interest in this. This is costing the community revenue, essentially is all you have to say. It was like, there are jobs and dollars to be made for anyone that wants to provide a space for this in a more adult setting, i.e. at a bar, right? And there are a lot of bars that are trying to find ways to keep people engaged longer and more safely, to control the pacing of how they serve their alcohol, which, by the way, is a poison. It's legal. But the thing is, as a bar owner, you really have to understand, it's like, hey, when someone wants to come in there for 4 hours, how are they spending that 4 hours? Right. The smart bar owners know that, and they have a plan for pacing people's drinks out, and they train their staff to do that as well. And that is 100% our goal. And through our tip certification, those kind of things are standards that we will enforce day in and day out once we open, regardless of whether someone's there playing D&D or playing Call of Duty for X amount of hours. I did want to answer a question you asked earlier, Jen. Left Jen. On my left. My left. You ask about the legacy consoles, like people playing Tetris and those kind of things, like NES, SNES, and then the more modern, right? And so we have a mixture of both, because that's our age range is anyone basically from 6 years old up to 60s plus. I mean, there really are people that have been gaming that long, and we want to try and accommodate everyone there. And if I can get a hold of a functioning Atari 2600, I'll throw one of those.
That's right.
Too.
Well, it's just like the nostalgia, because that's kind of the trend coming in of people like I said, I'm a D&D person from middle school, so I have not. Now that hasn't translated to anything, into modern gaming. It's still the old school.
Sure.
You
got your sheets, and that's your character, and these are your stats.
That's what we do.
We do have a viewer question from Jared, who is Orange Whip fam. So thanks, Jared. But it's a really good question. And he's first of all, he says, I love this. That's such an awesome idea, which I thought too, which is why we're talking today. But Jared wants to know, are there any licensing issues with the titles? We're calling out a lot of specific names here. So
did you have to deal with any of that?
So there are services that exist in the enterprise and commercial space that kind of aggregate that for you. And that's one of the tools that we use to deliver that and also to manage the network as far as the gaming goes. So they basically are the liaison for the licensing. But you're right. If you're talking about running a Call of Duty tournament and it's like, a large scale one, you absolutely do have to pay to license the tournament.
Okay.
But having partners and things like that kind of helps with that as well. And so we're building into those. But our focus, if I haven't said it already, is the casual gamer, not the competitive gamer.
Gotcha.
We love competitive gaming, but there are so many companies focused on esports right now. And unfortunately, a lot of them are failing because it is a very niche market. It doesn't mean that there aren't billions of dollars being poured into esports. There are.
Right.
But the one thing that any sports, whether it's or traditional sports, needs is fans. And right now they don't have it. Like if someone can name to me 10 esports orgs without looking at their phone right now, I'll give you $100.
Well, it's the struggle with the WNBA, right?
That's like, they built the stadiums and nobody wanted to come. People were sitting and watching at home, watching these esports games.
Right.
So, yeah.
And the pedigree for that was instilled through Twitch and YouTube and all these other streaming services internationally, and transitioning that to in person and building that propinquity and using proximity to facilitate those kind of things. That's an old school approach. That is a traditional sports. Hey, let's go watch the game down at the pub kind of thing. But you got to have the pub.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you got to have the reason to go there. Like I was just in Arlington 2 weeks ago at the largest esports stadium in the country. And it was a founder at a game that Dr. Disrespect is making and his team for Midnight Society. I got invited to go meet them. It was super cool. This place is massive. And even with 1,000 people there, it was about half full. And it was, and Optic Gaming was there. They're one of the biggest esports orgs on the Call of Duty side, most certainly, in the world. And they're based in Texas. So they had a huge turnout. But my point is that they've built the stadium. If you build it, they will come. And they're coming. But we need to help facilitate that. Baseball has this lineage of the, I think it was not a League of Their Own, Field of Dreams. Field of Dreams was the movie with Kevin Costner, and where he built it and they will come kind of thing, right? This is kind of the inverse of that, right? Like we need to make sure that the fan base is there because they built all this stuff and they're like, okay, come watch this in person. It's like, this isn't Worlds. That's a once a year thing that people are going to travel to wherever you tell them because it's such an event.
Right.
This is how do we do that every day of the week, slowly but surely building those communities up from a grassroots level. There has to be places for people to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
Jared,
that's where
I hope I answered your question there.
Yeah. Let us know, Jared, if you have any follow-up questions. Thanks.
Besides the licensing, you also kind of said the barriers in South Carolina, the language, because your business name is Reforged Gaming. Did just the word gaming trigger anything?
No, but the word lounge did. So we are Reforged Gaming Lounge. And this is why. So when I was a kid, it was about the year 1993. I'm super into basketball cards and baseball card collecting, right? As a lot of kids at the time did. We didn't put them in our spokes anymore because that completely destroyed them. And we were collecting them. We had Michael Jordan rookie cards at stake here. You don't put that, in your spokes and whatnot. You keep that safe. That's actually of value to people even now, right? Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, those were the guys, right? And the Dream Team folks that came in afterwards, all those guys were relevant when I was first coming up watching basketball, right? So those places, as you can imagine, weren't making hand over fist dollars. They were making decent money, but they wanted to make more. And so they started throwing out these coin-based machines that were basically digital slot machines, which was illegal. And so very quickly what they called them was, oh, no, this is a gaming lounge. Oh. People were coming here to play games. And for a while it worked until SLED got wind of it and other agencies was like, nah, it's gambling. But that term,
I thought it was going to take a different route when you said lounge.
I did too.
Those two words together have a taint to them, right?
Wow.
And this state, and maybe other states too, I'm not as familiar. I know in other states they do call them gaming lounges, and it's not the same. Like it's not said the same way. So we have had to deal with that through the last 6 years of people like, you can't open that here. That's illegal. And I was like, okay. what do you think I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And then they were like, here's what and they were like, well, what do you think I'm talking about? I was like, I'm talking about actual video games. Call of Duty. Heard of it? Mario, he jumps on the little dudes, he eats the mushroom, he gets bigger. Sometimes he throws fireballs when he eats a flower for some reason. I don't pretend to know why. It's just fun, right? And they're like, oh, we're not talking about the same thing. I was like, no, we are not. Like, did you call it something else? It's like, no, I don't decide what the industry calls things.
Yeah.
Like, this was decided at like a global level. Hey, we're gonna pick like these names, and the one that made the most sense to us was not esports center or LAN center, because those are things that are kind of previous and older versions of this. Is like, we really need to call it what it is,
and not arcade, because it's not an arcade. Yeah,
it's not, but it is certainly born of arcades. That's for sure. I think I need to put that on a t-shirt, actually. And born of Arcadia.
But honestly, it reminds me of it's born of a thing that most people didn't see. When I was in high school, there, I had friends who would bring their PCs. I mean, when the thing was like this big, and
their MacBook at the time, that was like the big huge.
It wasn't even. That was just the console, and they built them themselves because they were like mega nerds. And then you've got your monitor, and they'd all come to just like one guy's house who like dedicated a whole room to that thing. And it was like, I mean, to me, that's really it feels, that to me is what I feel more of the spirit of arcades as well, but that whole thing of like taking this experience, as a group. Arcades also maybe feel kind of like with roller rinks, so there's that more of that
like
social.
That's where you congregated.
Yeah. But
that
this
was the
is like
hangout.
there's this other piece that's like, this is our culture that we build around. So it's like really respect for everything about it, for the machinery, for the design, and for the competitiveness.
So
yeah, absolutely.
So you now you're getting your space, right? What do you think is, as you forge ahead? What do you feel like are the next barriers that you'll run into that you're like, all right, we're gonna knock these down?
I mean, so realistically, we gotta get that law changed to get more people that like to play involved, right? Because there is a decent amount of crossover from people that do D&D and play video games. We know this, that people want to play TGC, which is trading card games. So anything Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, all those things, right? That also do the video game counterparts of those. Those are also members of the community. They just prefer other ways of playing that are a little bit more in person. And then they transition, they kind of between the ebb and the flow of, hey, let's use some of this hardware to digitize some of this experience, and then let's pull back from that, right? And remember that this is the human experience thing too. And I kind of personally do that myself. So I think that's barrier really number one. Number two is, hey, as soon as we announce a gaming lounge, people are gonna be like, oh, the gambling thing. I was like, no, not the gambling thing. So that has not made its glorious return. There will be no return to that, at least from my business. If someone else wants to do that, fine, do whatever you do. That's on you. And realistically, I think it's just kind of, there are the collective of people out there that say, why would I ever pay for something like that? And that's a fair question. We've gotten that, not a lot, but enough to want to really show people why. It's like, because you don't get this at home. Just because you have a PlayStation at home doesn't mean, it might be a PlayStation 5 at home, the brand new one. Where's all the people? Are you going to invite your buddies over? You think the missus is going to have that? Well, you and the boys are in there playing Madden? No, it's not going to happen. And very, very quickly, people are going to find that out. Like, oh, this is why. It's like, it's not about getting access to the hardware. This was never about you can have access to that. Just like you can have access. You can cook the best meal you've ever had in your life at your home.
Right.
But you go to restaurants X amount of times, week, month, year. Why? Why is there an entire industry built up? There's fast food, there's QSRs,
or why do bars have a cover? It's like, you can drink with people much cheaper. Why would you? And you can go to bars for free that you can just walk into. Why go to?
There's liquor stores
or axe throwing facilities. If people can have axe throwing and people paying for that experience, gaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, gaming is just to me the final thing is I think it validates that it has really become part of the mainstream culture in the United States, and seeing more places like ours come online
Yeah.
really kind of makes that what used to be a stigma really a thing of the past, right? Because there was always the stigma when I was younger. If you like comic books, if you like video games, all that stuff, nerd,
Yeah.
loser, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, if you look at in entertainment in the last 10 years, the 180 that has happened across the board with the highest grossing movies, what are they? Comic book
Comic
movies,
books.
Mhm.
Yep.
right?
Comic
They're not
cons. I
right,
mean, they are flooded.
right. I was
I
like,
think
this
it's
is
because
just
the nerds rule the world now. I mean,
That's
like
right.
everyone at the top of the big tech companies that everyone's been fawning over or just depending on for the
right.
past decade
That's
and a
right.
half. They're all the nerds. That's how you get there.
Sure. They took over the world quietly and,
Yeah.
and took a lot of the money with them. And so now they have a lot of the control.
That's
That
right.
is very true. That is kind of how that went. But the reality of it is that doesn't mean that everyone can't still be involved. And that this is the whole point of like making this for everyone. And I would say the last barrier that we really want to focus on is that why you should care about esports, right? That's the number one thing I get from people that are diehard. I only care about traditional sports. I like football, baseball, basketball, soccer, but not so much in the US, which is tragic, but whatever. It's coming along. And it's the world's game, but not us. We're different. Remember that. Like
We use our hands with football.
yes, and it's like kind of an oblong egg, but but different still, and it's totally fine. It's whatever. Everybody, as long as you're having fun, it's fine. Everybody try and be as safe as possible when you're competing and have fun.
Another public service,
right?
announcement.
But the reality of it is, why people should care about this is like, all these colleges have built these programs around it. You can go and get a scholarship just like you can and be a student athlete. You can
NCAA recognizes it as
right.
I mean,
the Olympics, the next Olympics coming on, there's actually going to be a few games that are included in esports games side of the Olympics. That is happening. At last I had heard, at least. Well, we never know what the Olympic committee is actually going to do, but they said they were going to, so we'll see.
If they have trampolining, I think they can do esports.
Right. Sure. And it's like, you know what? Like, but all these things really start from, the average everyday person looking at this and saying, okay, I'll give that a go.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And if there's nowhere for them to do that isn't like, oh, we'll sign in at Twitch and look at this like wall of live video streams of people doing, and Twitch isn't really gaming focused anymore. It's kind of become like OnlyFans, but I don't know, free, I guess. I don't know much about OnlyFans, but I'm pretty sure it's a paid service.
It is, yeah. It's like Patreon,
yeah, right. One of those things, right? I was like, and that's fine. People are going to do whatever they're going to do, but if that's their entry point here, they're going 180. I'll just like, nah, too much. Like too much to sift through. It's not curated. It's not easy. If you come into us, there are people that are going to want you to be there, and they're gonna answer questions that you may have, and they're going to be knowledgeable about it because, well, that's their job, right? Is that to be excited about getting someone new into this thing, because every new person that joins, I mean, hey, it's great for us, but it's also just great for the community at large because it's another player that's choosing to get involved, right? To play the game. And you need more players in the game right now because there's a lot of people that pulled out of the game, right? This is an allegory for life, by the way. I don't know if this or not. We need more people to get back in the game, right? And however that is, and I think from the price point, we've priced it absolutely as competitively as possible, where basically anyone can do this. We could have made this a bit more lucrative on our end in the beginning, but that'll come with numbers, with growth of the community. If we can successfully grow the community, then the dollars will come with that. And we didn't do this as a way to like, oh, well, we need to build this company up over the next 5 years so I can flip this to Amazon and then go with Reed Hastings in Bali. He's waiting on me. He's just there a little early. I'll be there soon. That's 100% not our goal. And that's kind of why we didn't go the venture capital route. Like, it's not that we didn't talk to some and we didn't get offered the money, because both those things happened, but we also would have lost control of our company to someone that hadn't even heard of what we were doing. And then we explained it to them, and then they had their research team look at it. It was like, oh, video game industry. It's the highest growing entertainment
right.
industry.
It's a big one.
Oh yeah, we want in on that. And it was just like, okay, that's like such a small part of what we were doing, but that's fine. I'm glad that's what you clued in on. And that's kind of, where we found ourselves like, all right, we're going to put up this money. We're going to take a loan. We're going to do it this way. We're going to do it a more traditional business style.
Mhm.
And that's taken quite a while to get where it needs to be, especially in light of COVID and the way that the SBA did not change a lot of the rules
Yes.
for procuring a loan from them, which is just unbelievable to me, but whatever.
I'm going to put a little PSA plug. So I sit on an advocacy with the 10,000 small business. We are working right now to pitch, and we've got a whole plan to modernize the SBA because of that reason.
Mm-hmm.
Every bank has a different process.
Yep.
There's not consistency. It takes too long. They're supposed to be supporting small businesses, and they don't. It's too old.
If a global pandemic hits the world, they're just like, oh, you couldn't operate for 2 years, you're a startup again. And I was like, we were in business for almost 4 years, and we're considered a startup again because we just could not safely operate for 2. Yeah. So what that means for us is like, you can't apply for these things. These are the rules now when you apply for a loan, and it's worse. It's so much worse.
That's
because
right.
we're considered a higher risk. And it's like, but I can show you revenue from what we did. I can, all those things we talked about, I have pictures and records and videos like this happened, and they're just like, nah, it doesn't matter. It's like, come on.
Yeah,
that's right.
Unbelievable.
Well, man, good luck to you as you open. And where can everybody find out what's going on with the company? And you're so community focused. If they want to get engaged, let us know. Tell us, where can they find you? Where can they connect?
So LinkedIn is probably actually one of the most active places we are right now, ironically enough, just because, there's the business world on this side of things that is trying to get these folks to understand it's still a learning process a lot, and kind of let them know, hey, this is, these are legitimate business avenues, and this is how you can get involved with them. But then there's also the Facebooks, the YouTubes. YouTube is where a lot of our content coming forward as we make announcements and stuff. We really want to focus on YouTube primarily, YouTube Shorts and things like that. We do have a website. It is long overdue for an update, but we didn't have an update for the last 3 years to put out, really. So but by the end of next month, that we should have a nice update there to kind of
and what is that web address?
That is reforgedgaminglounge.com.
And that's Reforged, right?
Yeah, Reforged, past tense. Yep.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah,
and Jennifer, where people find out more about us and find more founders like Chris.
That's right. So follow us, Orange Whip, WIP.com. Hello Chaos can be found on all podcast platforms. Whether, our two favorites are obviously it's Apple and Spotify, our two most popular, but we are available everywhere. Or you can go to orangewhip.com and go to the Hello Chaos page, and come and subscribe to Orange Whip as well. We've got great hyper-local platforms in the Low Country, Midlands, and Upstate of South Carolina. Today, hopefully to launch in other cities, but you will find storytelling and hearing like how-tos through entrepreneurs like Chris, but you also get a curated resource directory and a curated events calendar that are all localized to help the founders and entrepreneurs navigate their market and make their life easier by being a one-stop content hub for them. We're one of the only media companies that do that. So
here.
Look for us.
It's a cool club to be in, isn't it, Chris? Just like
it is. It is.
One of the onlys.
Yeah. For sure.
Well, it's been great to meet you, Chris. Thanks so much. Best
and
of luck.
Good luck to you. We'll be keeping a watch on you.
I appreciate that. Thank y'all for your time. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.